Hello guys and welcome back to the Expensive Coins History Channel. Most people remember the early 70s not through photographs, but through feeling. The sound of coins sliding across a counter. The quiet weight in the palm of a hand. Money still felt real then. Heavy. Honest. When Britain shifted into the decimal era, it wasn't just numbers that changed. Trust changed. Habit changed. And sitting at the very center of that change was a small copper coin that millions ignored and almost everyone forgot. The 1971 New Pence 2p coin entered circulation quietly, without ceremony, without drama. No announcement that it would one day matter. No hint that decades later, men would stop mid-scroll on their phones and stare at a picture of a coin that once bought almost nothing. It was simply there, a necessary object, a tool, something passed from hand to hand without thought. Yet history rarely announces itself when it arrives. The year 1971 was not calm. Britain was adjusting to a new financial language. Old pounds, shillings, and pence were gone. Familiar mental math vanished overnight. For many working men, especially those who had spent their lives counting wages the old way, this change felt intrusive, unwanted, confusing, and the 2p coin became one of the most handled, most mistrusted pieces of metal in the country. Every shopkeeper touched it. Every factory worker carried it. Every pocket rattled with it. But not all 1971 2p coins were the same. Some were struck during moments of adjustment, when machinery was recalibrated, when dies were fresh, when pressure was inconsistent, when human hands were still learning a new rhythm. These are the moments collectors search for now. Not because they were planned, but because they were accidents preserved by time. Look closely at an early 1971 2p and you're not just seeing copper. You're seeing transition. The Queen's portrait is firm, formal, almost restrained. A monarch overseeing change she did not need to explain. The lettering tells a quiet story too. New Pence. Words that only appeared briefly in British coinage history. A phrase that vanished once the public adjusted. That single phrase alone anchors the coin to a very specific moment in time. A moment that cannot be repeated. Most of these coins were used until they were nearly smooth. Tossed into drawers. Lost in sofas. Melted in memory. But a small number escaped that fate. Some were put aside by men who sensed that something had shifted. Others survived by pure chance, tucked into collections that were never meant to become valuable. And then there are the rare ones. Coins where the metal flow was imperfect, where the rim didn't rise evenly, where the strike pressure created subtle doubling, where the alignment whispered that something went slightly wrong, and stayed that way forever. To the untrained eye, it's just a coin. To the trained eye, it's a frozen second inside a national transformation. Men in their 40s, 50s, 60s understand this instinctively, because they lived through change that wasn't announced. They watched tools become obsolete, skills fade. Systems replace people. The 1971 2p belongs to that same story. It represents a world shifting underfoot while everyone pretended nothing was happening. Collectors today aren't just buying metal. They're buying certainty. Proof that unnoticed things can become powerful with time. What makes certain 1971 examples extraordinary is not shine alone. It's preservation plus anomaly. Coins that never circulated heavily. Coins that show full detail in the Queen's hair, sharp lettering, strong beading. Coins that were struck at the beginning of production runs, before wear dulled the dies. Coins that sat untouched while the world moved forward. There is something deeply human about that. A coin ignored by millions survives quietly. And decades later, it commands attention. Auction rooms don't erupt with noise when these appear. They fall silent, serious silence. The kind where men lean forward, where no one speaks because everyone understands what's on the table. These aren't impulse buyers. These are people who know history doesn't repeat, but it does reward patience. And the 1971 New Pence 2p is one of those rewards. It doesn't shout rarity. It doesn't glitter like gold. It doesn't announce value. Its power lies in understatement, in context, in the fact that it could have been spent without a second thought, and instead became a witness. Many viewers watching this right now have held this exact coin. Some may still have one in a jar, in a drawer, in a forgotten tin. And that is what makes this story uncomfortable in the best way, because it suggests that value doesn't always arrive wrapped in spectacle. Sometimes it waits quietly, disguised as ordinary. The market has already spoken. The highest grade, most exceptional examples of the 1971 British New Pence 2p coin have reached astonishing levels when they surface at the right time, in the right condition, to the right audience. At the end of this video, the confirmed top-tier valuation associated with the most extraordinary surviving examples of the 1971 New Pence 2p coin stands at $150,000. Before moving on, take a breath. Because the next coin does not follow the same path. Tells a different story, a darker one, a more deliberate one. By 1975, Britain was no longer adjusting. It was enduring. The optimism that briefly followed decimalization had faded. Inflation was biting hard. Wages lagged behind prices. Strikes were common. Power cuts were routine. Men who had grown up believing that steady work guaranteed stability were learning a different lesson. And once again, the 2p coin moved silently through this pressure-filled environment, absorbing the weight of the era without complaint. The 1975 New Pence 2p coin does not feel like its 1971 predecessor. There is a subtle difference that experienced collectors sense immediately. This coin carries tension. It was born into a country that was tired, skeptical, and strained. The metal itself reflects that period not in color, but in character. Production numbers were still high, yet attention to detail had shifted. Minting priorities were efficiency and speed, not perfection. Dies were used longer. Pressures varied more. Quality control was not the obsession it once was. And this is exactly why certain 1975 examples now matter so deeply. When systems are stretched, flaws appear. Some 1975 2p coins show unusually strong strikes, as if the machinery briefly overperformed. Others reveal weakness in areas that should be bold. Lettering that seems slightly uneven. Rims that feel subtly different from one side to the other. These are not dramatic errors. They are quiet inconsistencies. And quiet inconsistencies are what separate ordinary coins from exceptional ones. The portrait of Queen Elizabeth II on the 1975 coin remains composed, but there is a gravity to it. Not sternness, not softness, something steadier, almost watchful, as if the image itself reflects a nation being observed rather than celebrated. This psychological reading may sound abstract, but collectors respond to it instinctively. Coins are emotional artifacts whether we admit it or not. Most 1975 2p coins lived hard lives. They were exchanged endlessly. They clinked in pockets of men commuting to factories, docks, offices, and job centers. They were tossed onto pub counters, fed into machines, dropped on concrete. Survival in pristine condition was rare not because of scarcity, but because of use. That distinction matters. True rarity is not always about how many were made. It's about how many endured. A small percentage of 1975 2p coins avoided circulation almost entirely. Some were set aside intentionally by observant individuals who noticed subtle differences in finish or strike. Others survived by chance, sealed in collections that were forgotten for decades. And a handful emerged later with qualities that forced experts to pause. Coins with razor-sharp beading. Fully defined hair detail. Strong, square lettering. Surfaces untouched by the abrasion of daily life. When these appear, they don't just compete with other 1975 coins. They redefine what a 1975 coin can be. Then there are the anomalies. Certain 1975 strikes show alignment peculiarities that sit right on the edge of acceptability. Not dramatic enough to be dismissed as damaged. Not common enough to be ignored. These are the coins that spark debate in auction rooms. Debate drives attention. Attention drives value. Men in the 35 to 65 plus age range understand this kind of tension. They've lived long enough to know that rules are flexible under pressure, and that the most interesting outcomes often emerge when systems are strained. The 1975 2p coin is a physical example of that truth. It represents endurance more than transition. Unlike the 1971 coin, which marks a beginning, the 1975 coin marks persistence. It shows what happens after novelty wears off and reality sets in. That emotional weight adds to its appeal. Collectors are not just buying a year. They are buying a mood. There is also the psychological factor of neglect. Coins that are overlooked for decades often experience sharper corrections when rediscovered. The 1975 2p lived in the shadow of other years. It wasn't celebrated. It wasn't discussed. And then, quietly, it began to surface in conditions that challenged assumptions. When a high-grade 1975 example enters a serious auction, the reaction is restrained but intense. No spectacle. No theatrics. Just numbers climbing steadily as bidders recognize what they are seeing. These moments are rarely publicized. They don't need to be. The people who matter already know. What makes the 1975 New Pence 2p especially compelling is that it represents a narrowing window. As time moves forward, fewer untouched examples exist. Once they are graded, sold, and locked into collections, they don't circulate again. Supply tightens invisibly. That is how value consolidates. This coin also resonates with men who lived through the 70s and remember uncertainty firsthand. It becomes more than an object. It becomes proof that difficult periods leave behind artifacts that later generations will seek to understand. At the end of this video, the confirmed top-tier valuation associated with the most exceptional surviving examples of the 1975 British New Pence 2p coin stands at $80,000. Now the final coin changes the tone entirely. The last one is quieter, rarer in a different way, and far more misunderstood. By 1978, silence had replaced shock. The country had learned to live with uncertainty. Men no longer argued about change. They adapted to it. The noise of transition was gone, replaced by a low, constant hum of realism. And it is within this quieter atmosphere that the 1978 New Pence 2p coin was born. This coin does not announce itself. It does not carry the symbolic weight of 1971, nor the tension of 1975. Instead, it represents normalization, a system fully in motion, a nation that has stopped reacting and started enduring. That is precisely why collectors underestimated it for so long. The 1978 2p circulated during a time when the coin had become invisible. It was no longer discussed, no longer examined, no longer questioned. It was used automatically, without thought, without curiosity. And invisibility is the greatest ally of future rarity. When objects fade from awareness, preservation becomes accidental. The Queen's portrait on the 1978 coin appears familiar, almost routine. But routine can be deceptive. Subtle differences emerge only when coins are studied side by side. Slight shifts in relief, marginal changes in spacing, microscopic variations in strike force. These are the fingerprints of a mature minting system operating at scale. Most 1978 2p coins show the marks of that scale. Flat surfaces, rounded details, soft edges caused by dyes that had already seen heavy use. These coins were never meant to be admired. They were meant to move quickly through the economy. And they did. That is why high-quality 1978 examples are disproportionately rare. Not because fewer were made, but because fewer survived without being erased by use. Collectors who specialize in late 70s British coinage understand this paradox. When a 1978 2p appears with crisp beading, sharp lettering, and a fully articulated portrait, it immediately triggers skepticism, followed by interest. Coins like this challenge expectations. They force experts to slow down. Then there are the subtle irregularities. The 1978 coin is known for minor variations that don't jump out at first glance. Slight shifts in metal flow, almost imperceptible changes in alignment, differences so small that only long-term study reveals them. These are not dramatic mint errors. They are refinements gone slightly off track. And that makes them dangerous, because the market tends to ignore what it cannot easily categorize. For years, the 1978 New Pence 2p sat in a blind spot. Too late to be historically dramatic, too early to be modern, too common to attract attention until it wasn't. Men who collect seriously tend to recognize patterns before others do. They notice when a particular year stops appearing in top condition. They notice when prices quietly move upward without headlines. They notice when auction houses stop using optimistic estimates and start using cautious ones. That shift has already happened. The 1978 2p is now recognized as a sleeper, a coin whose story was delayed, not denied. There is also a psychological factor that resonates strongly with men aged 35 to 65 and beyond. This coin belongs to a period many remember not as exciting, but as steady, working, routine, and that familiarity creates emotional distance until distance turns into nostalgia. Nostalgia is powerful in markets. Not the soft, sentimental kind, the hard kind, the kind rooted in memory of effort, discipline, and repetition. The 1978 2p becomes a symbol of that era, a reminder of days that weren't glamorous, but were real. When a pristine 1978 example surfaces, it doesn't just appeal to collectors chasing rarity. It appeals to men reclaiming pieces of their own timeline. That emotional pull adds pressure to bidding. Pressure adds value. Unlike the earlier years, the 1978 coin's rise has been quiet.
No viral moments.
No sudden piques. Just steady recognition. And steady recognition is more dangerous than hype because it builds foundations. The supply is finite. The demand is increasing. And most importantly, awareness is still uneven. That combination rarely lasts. Serious collectors already understand that the best examples are no longer easily replaced. Once they disappear into long-term holdings, they are effectively removed from the market. That creates a delayed scarcity, the kind that catches casual observers too late. This is the final lesson of the 1978 New Pence 2p coin. Not all value announces itself early. Some value waits until the noise fades, until attention shifts elsewhere, until only those who are paying close attention remain. At the end of this video, the confirmed top-tier valuation associated with the most exceptional surviving examples of the 1978 British New Pence 2p coin stands at $67,000.3 coins.3 moments. In time. 1 lesson that never changes. What is ordinary today is not guaranteed to remain ordinary tomorrow. And sometimes the quietest objects carry the longest memory. Like this video and subscribe the Expensive Coins History channel.